Hey everyone, I'm Matt Friedman, Matt F. the Oracle. It's Thursday, October 15th, 2015, and it's time for another edition of the College Daily Slant, powered by Pro Football Focus and brought to you by DraftKings.com. This is the PFF radio show dedicated to college football and daily fantasy sports, and we have a great show coming up. With me is Wes Huber, a PFF fantasy college football lead writer. You can follow him on Twitter at PFF_Wes. Wes, how's it going?
Doing pretty well. It's been a challenging week, but I'm really excited to get started and talk about some college football. So
It's week 7. It's exciting times right now.
I agree.
And we're in the thick of conference action. From now till the end of the season, every week, every game is just going to keep on becoming more important, growing in significance. We're going to see a ton of great football in the second half of the season. And at Pro Football Focus, we have all the college football content you need. And with the PFF Fantasy Gold Package, you can get it all for only $29.99. In case you are new to the show, we're going to start out by looking at some notable storylines from Saturday's games. Wes is going to highlight some of the important Las Vegas lines, and then we're going to give you our Week 7 DraftKings and FanDuel plays of the week. And Wes will close it out by giving you a couple of plays for Fantasy Feud. Wes, let's get into it. Give us a rundown of the top storylines, injuries, suspensions. What are the news items that fantasy players need to know for Week 7? And let's start with the quarterback position.
Okay, there's not a whole lot to report. Nothing that's news breaking. Vernon Adams Jr. for Oregon. It's still a mystery if that index finger has healed up enough for him to take the field. If he doesn't play, avoid that situation altogether. Michael Brewer, he of course broke his collarbone. I reported last week that it looked like he was going to play, looked like he had been cleared. Then all of a sudden we found out that he was not cleared to play, and so he sat out another week. Still no clearance from what has been reported. Go down to Florida. Devastating news. Will Grier not only suspended for the rest of the season, suspended for a calendar year. We're looking at not having him back at Florida for quite some time. Treon Harris is taking over. Just to avoid that situation. Basically, with Florida, we're looking at last season's team with Jim McElwain as the coach, which is a huge upgrade. Don't mistake me there, but Treon Harris has already proven that he is not the type of player that is the type of quarterback, great athlete, but not the quarterback capable of leading the Florida team with a great defense in the SEC. And then finally, we come to East Carolina. Last week, I went with James Summers as a dart play at quarterback, and he did come through with 55 yards and a touchdown, but against BYU. But they're flip flopping their quarterbacks, going back and forth, and they're keeping that hush hush. We don't really know anything about who's going to start against Tulsa in a juicy matchup. It's basically a wasted opportunity for DFSers.
I hear you there. Let's go to the running back position. What are the news items there?
Yeah, plenty there. I mean, we'll start out, of course, with Georgia and Nick Chubb severed his PCL, against Tennessee last week, and I mean that's just devastating across the board. Nobody wants to see anybody get hurt, but even less a special talent like Nick Chubb. Done for the year. It opens up the backfield for Sony Michel. If you've watched any of the Georgia games, Sony Michel is an elite athlete, and he showed it. I mean, he is a very difficult player to tackle, and he is definitely the top waiver ad in your fantasy league this week. Another team that has really turned it on and actually almost doubled the score against UCLA, Arizona State. They lost Demario Richard last week at the end of the game. He left the game on crutches. They finished out the game with DJ Foster and Kalen Ballage. He's questionable this week going up against Utah. Utah does have a very stout run defense. They rank 39th in the country, but they're just not going to be the type of rushing offense that not only do they lose Richard at running back, but then they also have to lose DJ Foster from the slot. And it handicaps them going up into the biggest game of the year for them. Staying in the Pac-12, we've got Nick Wilson at Arizona. It's looking like he may not play. He left last week's game with an arm injury, and then come to find out he's also got a foot injury. So he's going up against Colorado State, which has a very questionable run defense. I'm sorry that he injured himself against Colorado State. He's going up against Colorado, who also has a very questionable run defense. But the silver lining there is that Orlando Bradford, one of the guys I highlighted in the preview series in the preseason, he's a true freshman coming in. Last week he had, I believe, 19 carries, 80 yards, and 3 TDs. So definitely someone to watch. Wisconsin, Taiwan Deal, looking like he's questionable to play. He hurt his ankle last week, which presents a large number of carries to Dare Ogunbowale, and they're going up against the Purdue team with the number 110 ranked run defense. So that's another situation. A very disappointing situation exists in Indiana, where Jordan Howard, who injured his ankle against Ohio State last week, went into play Rutgers, and or they're playing Rutgers this week. But last week he was on the sidelines prior to their game, and it looked like he was in pads, ready to go, and nobody reported anything. He just didn't play. So it just pretty much makes his DFS availability really in question, and that's a shame considering he's been one of the top running backs this year. Another guy that there's been very little information released is Keon Kenner at Kansas. To say that the opportunity is really exciting for him this week going up against Texas Tech is an understatement. Texas Tech is arguably the worst run defense in the country, and he's supposedly banged up, but they're keeping it all under wraps as far as his status. We really don't know. But the matchup with Texas Tech makes it a situation to definitely monitor. As far as the starting situations, Shannon Brooks in Minnesota is the only one that I'll touch on. He is possibly looking at supplanting Rodney Smith, and I'm not surprised. He absolutely went off last week against Purdue, and it would be a great opportunity for DFS if he does. The other questionable tags this week, I'm just going to mention their names: Saquon Barkley at Penn State, Michael Atkins at Colorado, and Madre London at Michigan State.
All right, and thinking of Nick Chubb, it seems in particular that those SEC running backs are cursed a little bit. Those top guys, Marcus Lattimore tearing his ACLs twice, Todd Gurley last year, and then Nick Chubb this year. Hopefully all of those premium prospects can stay healthy when they go to enter the NFL. Now let's go to the wide receivers. What are the notable storylines there?
Yeah, and this is where it gets extremely thin. The only one that is of note, Devin Lauderdale will return this week for Texas Tech. He had some internal bruising, suffered against Baylor in Week 5. He's going to play against Kansas. And just mentioning in passing, Malcolm Mitchell is questionable, and so is Geronimo Allison at Illinois, Malcolm Mitchell at Georgia. Geronimo Allison has a concussion, so he's in the concussion protocol this week.
All right, and then it's time for my favorite part of the show. Let's talk about the tight ends and everything going on there.
Yeah, and I definitely would not leave you hanging at the tight ends, because I know how you look forward to this. Evan Ingram, one of the most disappointing players in all of college football this season, has an undisclosed injury, and he may not even play this week against Memphis. And another a tight end player that could present even more fantasy value for another, Joel Ruiz for Georgia State, will miss the rest of the season. He had knee surgery. Well, that will, in my opinion, push Penny Hart into top 20 and possibly top 10 conversation, he's going to be the only reliable target for Nicholas Arbuckle. Now, if teams focus their defenses, I could see them possibly shutting him down. But Penny Hart has been already a dominant wide receiver this season out of nowhere, and that should only increase going forward.
All right, now let's look at some of the Vegas lines. Let's start with the games that have high over-unders. Presumably, there could be a lot of point opportunities for the players in those games. And I think we have to start with Texas Tech and Kansas. Tech is looking like they will score a mountain of points this week. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, we honestly should just rename this segment the Texas Tech and Bowling Green update. As far as Texas Tech and playing Kansas, could just listen to this. Kansas is as far as defenses go, they have they're 119 in passing defense out of 127. They're 120th in rushing defense. Texas Tech is 110 in passing defense and 125 in rushing defense. It's absolutely ridiculous. Both of these teams give up more than 500 yards of offense so far this season, and you could just go down the list in every statistical category of defense, and it's absolutely disgusting. Now on the flip side, on the offense, Kansas has been decent decent with their passing offense, and Montel Cozart has been the one that has played decently well, but he's out. He has been injured. There's really not a whole lot to report there because Kansas keeps all their injury information hush-hush. But one thing to consider as far as Kansas goes, they average 4.7 yards per play. They give up 7.1 yards per play. I mean, they are just an absolute terrible defensive team. And they're only averaging 17 points per game despite, like I said, finishing or coming in at number 70 in their passing offense. And then on top of that, we really don't know what's going on with their running back, Keon Kenner. We could see Cox coming in, their backup, again like last week and taking some carries, but he did absolutely nothing with the majority of the carries last week. The projection on this game, 77.5 over under. We're looking at Texas Tech winning by 31 points. And with a projected score of 53-22, which is ridiculous. I don't even know if Kansas is going to put up 22 points. Now, as far as the Texas Tech side, you stack away. There's very few guys that if you know are going to get a certain number of snaps in the game that you want to play them this week if you can fit them under your salary.
Yeah, I'm with you right there. In fact, I'm stacking in my optimal FanDuel lineup 3 Texas Tech players, which is probably a little risky, but risk is my middle name. Let's go to the Akron and Bowling Green State game. This looks like it will be a fantastic shootout, a lot of points on both sides. Talk to me about this game.
Yeah, and I like we discussed before we started recording. I asked you who if you could name the number 2 running back and Pro Football Focus's ratings over the last 3 weeks, and you obviously came back with the Bowling Green running back, but actually Connor Hundley at Akron has been that guy. Akron is not as bad as I think the odds makers have projected. If you look at the past 3 weeks, 4 weeks since Thomas Woodson has been named the starting quarterback, he comes in at number 8 in the PFF rating system. This is a decent team. I graded an Akron game just a few weeks ago, and I was really impressed by that team altogether. Terry Bowden has, of course, they're only 3-3, but he's still put together a competitive team that. Not that I think that they're going to take Bowling Green down, especially not playing at Deutsch Perry Stadium. This is a home game for Bowling Green. I think Bowling Green pulls it out, but I don't agree with the line of 12 points for Bowling Green, and that's an opportunity in and of itself. And the over/under at 68 is just great for DFS purposes. We're looking at a score with Bowling Green reaching possibly 40 points and Akron somewhere in the 30s. And Of course, Akron hasn't played the toughest of schedules yet, and they did lose to Oklahoma, Pittsburgh, and Ohio, which are three decent teams. But like I said, that they come in with the 17th ranked run defense. I mean, the 17th ranked run defense, and which is great, but it's not going to stop Bowling Green's passing attack. Akron is number 68 in passing defense, and they give up 225 a game. Well, you can go ahead and chalk up 400 this week for Matt Johnson. That is going to continue. But what I do think is that the offense will score enough points to keep this close. Now, Bowling Green, their rushing defense has actually been steadily climbing over the last few weeks. Now, their passing defense has been dropping at the same time. They're number 126 out of 127, giving up 325 yards a game, 12.1 yards per completion. They're at the same time, you got an offense that's averaging, a passing offense that's averaging 435 yards, 13.3 yards per completion, and 19 touchdowns. Both of these teams average more yards per play than they give up. And I think that's what makes this a game that will be able to maintain the back and forth score in order to balance out the DFS plays in this game.
Now let's look at a couple of games that maybe people should be a little bit cautious about based on the Vegas lines. And let's start with Michigan State and Michigan. It should be a fantastic football game, maybe not good for DFS purposes. What are your thoughts there?
Okay, so it's projected that Michigan will win by a touchdown. We're looking at a 24-17 game. But we're only going to get somewhere around 40 points. And that's just simply not enough to look at stacking. Now, there are some individuals in this game that you could definitely throw into your lineup. Now, I do want to point one thing out. Michigan comes in with the number 2 ranked passing defense and the number 3 ranked rushing defense. Well, let's also look at who they've played this year. They've played Oregon State. They've played UNLV. They played BYU, Maryland. They did have that big win against Northwestern, but they've also played Utah, which they lost. Okay, so what's the factor that is the big difference for all those teams that they've played? Well, Utah is, I believe, number 39 in rushing defense. Now, I know Northwestern has a good rushing defense themselves, but last week they were unable to generate any offense. That was the problem. For Utah, they have a decent offense, a great running game, and they have a shutdown, stout run defense, which Michigan lost. That is the factor that I think is going to hold Michigan up this year, but not in this game. Now, Michigan State does rank number 34 in rushing defense, and I think that will definitely limit that offense. I'm not sure if Michigan State is enough to take down Michigan. Here's the problem. Michigan State's offensive line is truly suffering right now. Not only is left tackle Jack Conklin out, I believe there are other I read in the Skype chat the PFF analyst talking about the problems on the Michigan State offensive line. I believe their right tackle is also out, and they're playing a defensive lineman at another offensive line position. And it's not worked. It's not been working. It's been a terrible situation for them. And on top of that, their passing offense has not been to where I thought it would be. Connor Cook has been playing tremendous. He's one of the top-ranked quarterbacks in the PFF system right now. But as far as generating the points, that's the problem. They've not been scoring a whole lot of points this season, and it's been a problem. Now, of course, they scored a lot in the early part of the season, but anyway, we'll look at it this way. Michigan State, they're averaging 5.9 yards per play. They're giving up 5.6. Michigan averaging 5.5, giving up 3.1. Michigan has been just an absolutely dominant defensive team, arguably the top defensive team, and playing at home in Ann Arbor is going to be a difficult matchup for the Spartans.
All right, and then another matchup that might cause some trepidation when it comes to fantasy players is Boston College and Clemson. Tell us about that matchup.
Yeah, I mean, Clemson, going back to last season, explosive. I mean, you just wanted a piece of that offense. let me qualify that, with Deshaun Watson at quarterback, and a few players without. But when Deshaun Watson was in there, I mean, you had to have those guys in your lineups. It's not been the case, necessarily so far. Their passing game has not been dominant. You could play Deshaun Watson, you could play Wayne Gallman. I wouldn't play either this week. Boston College has the #1 ranked run and pass defense in the country, and they do that by controlling the clock. They are one of the most. I hate saying this, as far as, and I don't mean this as a in any way condescending, but they're very boring on offense. They use a lot of different formations of just basically running the ball right up the middle, and not that that's, if it works, great, but man, it really slows down the game and eats up the clock and prevents the other team's offense from getting on the field. Now, if it worked, that would be great, but they're 3-3, so I really wish they would open things up just a little bit to allow their quarterbacks to do some work. Coming into this game, it's a 37.5-point over/under. It's one of the lowest of the week. Clemson comes in as 15.5-point favorite. Regardless, this is going to be a very, very slow game. You might throw a Clemson player in there if you're daring, but I would avoid it altogether. It's not the matchup that just screams DFS to me, considering Boston College only gives up 2.6 yards per play.
Yeah, I love watching college football, but if I had the option of watching this game or taking a nap, I would probably take a nap. Now, Wes, fantastic information as always. Very helpful for everyone in setting their college fantasy football lineups. Of course, if you are playing DFS for college football, then you are also probably doing it for the NFL. We've had some great regular season action so far, and it feels like the playoffs every week, thanks to 1 Week Fantasy Football at DraftKings.com. With millions of dollars being won each week, every play in every game could take you closer to a life-changing payday. This isn't fantasy as usual. This is DraftKings. Welcome to the big time. Hurry to DraftKings.com now and use promo code PFF. With your first deposit, you can play for free in this Sunday's $1 million fantasy football contest. First place takes home $100,000. Enter PFF for a free entry now at DraftKings.com. That is DraftKings.com. All right, Wes, speaking of the big time, let's get into it. Our Week 7 plays for DraftKings and FanDuel. Who are the two quarterbacks you like this week, one at DraftKings and one at FanDuel?
All right, the one I chose at DraftKings was easy. I already mentioned him. I went with Akron Thomas Woodson, comes in at $6,800. I'm trying to keep my quarterbacks, being the key word there, to keep my quarterbacks under 7,000 to give you some options. The Akron, they come into the matchup with Bowling Green. It's a 68-point over/under, and I already mentioned they're expected to score somewhere in the 30-point neighborhood. And I already mentioned how well Woodson has done in the weeks that he's been named the starter for the team over Kyle Pohl. He's also very impressively 8th in the FBS in attempt percentage of 20 plus yard attempts, coming in at 24.3 of his total targets were at 20 plus yards. He's also the 10th most difficult player to sack in the NCAA. And one of the things when I was grading this game with Akron, he has a swagger in the pocket. There's no doubt about it. He doesn't get flustered. He stays in there. He looks through his reads and he tries to find the open man regardless of pressure coming in his face. Now, that doesn't mean that he's been the top quarterback in the country. I'm confident that he can have a really good game this week against Bowling Green. Bowling Green, as I mentioned, number 126 out of 127 passing defense, and it's basically an easy decision. Now, over on FanDuel, I struggled with selecting a quarterback under 7,000. In order to provide a player that you can actually use, I cheated a little bit. I went with a guy that comes in at 7,500, Paxton Lynch at Memphis. Now, they're going to lose this game. They're playing against Ole Miss. Ole Miss they're highly motivated after losing to Alabama when they were considered a team destined to make the playoffs early in the season. But even so, Memphis is going to score around 30 points in this game. And Paxton Lynch has been absolutely tremendous this season, keeping his team within each of their games with his arm and his legs. He's actually had last season he had over 10 rushing touchdowns. Hasn't had to do that this year, but consider that Memphis's defense ranks 106 in the country, and he still kept them to a perfect record thus far. He hasn't scored less than 23 fantasy points per game this season. Ole Miss comes in with the 51st ranked passing defense. They've given up 10 touchdowns through the air this season. And Paxton is number 5 in accuracy percentage at 80.8%, which is completely threw me off guard by his performance this season. I did not see this coming. And he's also number 5 in accuracy percentage at 20-plus yards. He's completed 12 of 19 attempts at 20-plus yards for 465 of his passing yards and 3 touchdowns to 0 interceptions.
Wes, fantastic stuff there. And kind of opposite from you, I try to keep my picks above $9,000, which can be difficult because there aren't that many quarterbacks up there. And I guess I'm like a gymnast. I'm a huge fan of chalk. At DraftKings, I'm going with Seth Russell from Baylor at $9,000. He's actually $300 cheaper than he was last week. I think that he's the best quarterback in the country. And of the 3 elite quarterbacks with advantageous matchups, that would be Matt Johnson, Patrick Mahomes, and Russell. Russell is actually the cheapest of those 3 at DraftKings. So I think you can get a little bit of an arbitrage play there. Baylor's a big home favorite against West Virginia. The Bears continue to throw the ball even when they are ahead. And I think it might be possible that West Virginia scores just enough points this game to encourage Art Briles to leave his starters in longer and to let them continue to pile up the production. Russell, I think, has a realistic chance of getting 300 yards and 4 touchdowns in every game he plays, and this game is really no different. At FanDuel, I'm going with Patrick Mahomes from Texas Tech at 9,300. Despite being limited by a knee injury in weeks 4 and 5, Mahomes is the slate's 2nd most productive quarterback on a points-per-game basis, and he trails Russell by only half a point per game. He's a strong passer and an underrated runner. Through 6 games, he has never accounted for fewer than 300 total yards and 3 touchdowns in a game. So he is basically just as consistent as they come at the quarterback position and basically just as productive as they come. On average, he passes for over 375 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he rushes for over 30 yards and exactly a touchdown per game. Tech scores the 2nd most points of any team in the FBS. They have the slate's highest implied point total, 53.25 points as the road favorite against Kansas. Again, we've talked about this. Kansas has one of the worst defenses in the FBS. Mahomes should be able to accumulate, I think, pretty easily 325 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Jayhawks. And I think he has 400-yard and like 5 touchdown upside. So I think he makes for a nice floor and a nice ceiling play. Now, let's go to the running backs. Wes, which 2 players do you like there?
Okay, and I already mentioned my guy for DraftKings, Shannon Brooks. I'm trying to keep my DraftKings guy under 5,000. He's exactly 5,000. It's the true freshman. He was absolutely dominant last week against Purdue. Was given 17 carries, ran for 176 yards and a touchdown. The Minnesota Golden Gophers are favored to win the game by 2, so I think that they'll get a lead and they'll give him the rock to generate some offense. And consider this: if he continues the way he's playing right now throughout the rest of the season, you will hear Shannon Brooks all over the place at Pro Football Focus. On 37 carries so far, he's broken 16 tackles, generating a 264 elusive rating that is just beyond anything anyone could imagine. And then on top of that, 62.5% of his rushing yards come on 15-plus yard runs. He's been just a phenomenal player so far. And I think that he's going to have a good game, even though Nebraska is a decent run defense. I think that is more the product of Nebraska being the 127 out of 127 pass defense, and a lot of teams have exploited that. Over on FanDuel, staying under $6,000, like Vanderbilt's Ralph Webb at 5,300. Now they are predicted to lose to South Carolina. That is, I did not read that wrong to you. They are predicted to lose to South Carolina. South Carolina is just terrible. I mean, terrible. Regardless, the 2.5 points is not a problem for a running back. They're still projected to score around 25 points. I think Vanderbilt will beat South Carolina this week. But consider this: Ralph Webb has gotten 25 carries or more, or actually, I think 25 carries exactly in 3 of the last 4 games. He's also got 5 touchdowns in those 4 games total, and he's had at least 18 fantasy points per game in each of those. He's got 17 receptions this season and on 26 targets. And South Carolina has the 105th ranked run defense in the country, giving up 208 yards per game, 13 touchdowns to running backs, and 5.5 yards per carry.
Wes throwing out the SEC hot takes with Vandy over a Steve Spurrier-less South Carolina. I like it. On DraftKings, I'm going with Jordan Canzeri from Iowa, 6,200. He's a guy who gets mentioned a lot on the show, and for good reason. Even as his salary has increased throughout the year, he has continued to remain undervalued. Iowa's game with Northwestern isn't going to be a high-scoring affair, but it should be close. Canzeri should be fed the ball. He's a decent receiver out of the backfield. He's been consistent all season. Out of all the running backs in this slate, he has the second most production on a per-game basis, and that was with him kind of splitting touches with another running back earlier in the season. He has a low-end running back one salary, so he's available at a discount to his production. And again, even though this won't be high-scoring, Canzeri is so integral to Iowa's offense and to what they do. He scores such a high percentage of Iowa's touchdowns that it doesn't need to be a high-scoring game for him to be productive. I think he has a 100-yard floor with room for upside, and he has a strong chance of scoring a touchdown. And then on FanDuel, I'm going with Chris Hairston from Eastern Carolina at $5,300. Hairston is easily, on FanDuel slate, one of the most undervalued running backs of the week. He's the lead back on a double-digit home favorite, expected to score almost 45 points against a Tulsa team that allows a lot of points anyway. Hairston should have highly advantageous game flow, and he has never had fewer than 15 touches in any 2015 contest, so you can basically lock him in for anywhere from 15 to 22 touches in this game. He's averaging 1 touchdown per game and over 85 scrimmage yards and 3 receptions. He's available at an immense discount to his 2015 production. And given East Carolina's implied point total and his role in the offense, he should be able easily to amass at least 80 scrimmage yards, a touchdown, and a couple of receptions. Again, he's the slate's 15th most productive running back, but he's only the 55th most expensive running back. So available at a huge discount to his production up to this point in the season. Again, given that production and that price tag, I think that he is a must start. Now, let's go to the wide receivers. Wes, who are the 2 guys you like there?
All right, and I already mentioned my DraftKings play here. Devin Lauderdale returns this week for Texas Tech, comes in at $4,400, and I'm trying to keep the salary under $5K. Of course, Texas Tech is looking at scoring in the 50 range. They're the number 1 passing offense in the country. 439 yards per game, plenty to go around. But on top of that, Devin Lauderdale is the 1B to Jakeem Grant at 1A for targets on the team. And he's the number 1 deep threat. He's the guy that Mahomes looks to beyond 20 yards. And also consider Kansas as the 119th passing defense in the country. They've given up 14 touchdowns to wide receivers. And Lauderdale, outside of the game that he was injured, has put up 22.6 fantasy points per game this season. He's averaging 1.92 yards per route run, and he's caught 3 or 4 of his deep targets for 2 touchdowns. Over on FanDuel, trying to stay under $6,000, I'm completely shocked, and I mentioned this to you earlier, that Calvin Ridley's salary is maintained at $4,500, the bottom barrel price. I don't know. I have no way of explaining this. Calvin Ridley has been one of the top wide receivers in the SEC, arguably the top wide receiver in the SEC over the past several weeks, yet he remains at the bottom price for anybody. Again, he was the top-rated wide receiver recruit coming into this season, so it shouldn't be a great shock that he's already excelling. He's a big-time playmaker, has poise, confidence, it looks like Amari Cooper all over again. And I mean, that I'm not just throwing that around lightly either. He's a really talented player. Alabama's projected to score in the neighborhood of 30 points and possibly more. They average 34 points a game. Since the injury to Robert Foster that opened up the starting spot for Ridley, he's collected 18 of 19 targets. He's put up 2.13 yards per route run. He's collected 2 or 3 of his 20-plus yard targets, both of them going to the house for TDs. His 2 games ago against Georgia, 5 receptions, 120 yards, a 45-yard touchdown. Last week against Arkansas, 9 catches, 140 yards, and a touchdown. Just put him in every single lineup that you have at that price. If you don't, then you're losing value. Take advantage now, and who knows though, they may keep him at $4,500 going into next week as well, and he'll be on my pick list as well.
Wes, fantastic call there with Calvin Ridley. No surprise at DraftKings, I'm going with Corey Coleman from Baylor, $8,200. I think the slate has a lot of great receiving options, but I love Coleman. He's simply the best wide receiver in the country right now. Even though Baylor had a bye in week 3, Coleman still leads the FBS by a wide margin in total touchdowns receiving. He's 5th in yards receiving. He's the most productive and I think the most consistent receiver in the slate, but he has the 2nd highest price, so he's available at a slight discount. Depending on your perspective, his worst game was either in week 1 when he had 178 yards and 1 touchdown, or it was last week when he had 108 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, that's the type of awesome consistency that he's providing, that those are his worst games. No other receiver has anything close to that blend of consistency and production. Baylor is a big home favorite with the slate's 2nd highest implied point total. Coleman's downside, I think, is 100 yards and a touchdown, and his upside is 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. On FanDuel, I'm going with the other Texas Tech wide receiver, Jakeem Grant, at 6,900. I want as many Texas Tech players as I can get in my lineup without being totally unreasonable. Tech is, again, 2nd in scoring in the FBS. They haven't scored fewer than 5 touchdowns in any game all season. They're playing a team that is winless and that allows the 4th most points in FBS, and they're expected to outscore every team on the FanDuel slate by at least 5 points. Grant is the slate's 4th most productive wide receiver on a points-per-game basis. He's available at a respectable discount. He has the 8th highest salary. In 6 games, he has 7 touchdowns, 4 receiving, 1 rushing, 1 returning, and 1 passing. So he touches the ball in a variety of ways. Anytime he touches the ball, he has a chance to get a touchdown. He has a touchdown in 5 of 6 games. He leads Tech by a wide margin in receptions and yards receiving. He has a 75-yard, 1 touchdown floor, and I think 125-yard and 2 touchdown ceiling. So I think he gives a lot of value at his price there. Now, Wes, let's go to the tight end position at FanDuel. Who do you like there?
All right, I've found little success this season outside of going with Mark Andrews, even though he didn't come through for me last week. This week I'm going to give you a really deep play, but one that I think has a lot of upside. Iowa tight end George Kittle. He comes in at $2,300. 6'4", 235-pound junior. He's emerged over the last few weeks, and that's greatly out of response to the way C.J. Beathard has played. He has a touchdown reception 3 weeks in a row. He's caught all 6 of his catchable targets, with 2 out of 2 of those coming at 20-plus yards and both being taken for touchdowns. He's generating 2.39 yards per route run, which would rank him number 5 among tight ends if he qualified, just below Tyler Higbee if he qualified.
You know, I think one of the great things about Kittle is that his name combines kitten and Skittles, and who doesn't love those 2 things?
Exactly.
So really the tight end position is so barren, and I kind of put you in a hole there because I claimed Rodney Mills from UMass, $3,300 as my tight end for the week, and he's the guy I recommended last week. He had a good week, over 100 yards receiving. His salary has increased by only $200. He is not an elite tight end option, but for this slate, he's really as close as it comes to an elite option. He's essentially a big-bodied wide receiver playing the move tight end position. He's missed 2 games, and the other 3 games he played, in one of them he did absolutely nothing, and then in the other 2 he went over 100 yards receiving in both of them. And he's actually leading the team in the games that he's played. He's, I guess, tied for the team lead in touchdowns receiving. He's UMass's second receiving option right now, behind number 1 wide receiver Tajay Sharp, or Tajai Sharp, however it is that you want to butcher his name. But he's a guy who is heavily involved in the offense. And UMass, over the last couple of years, they've distributed a high percentage of their touchdowns to tight ends. So he really is in an optimal situation. UMass is favored over Kent State at home. And given Mills' role in the offense, I think he has a good chance of finishing week 7 with 50 yards and a touchdown. And kind of in an extreme example, he does have the upside of having a kind of Tyler Higbee-esque 100-yard and 2 touchdown game if things break right. Now, let's look at the flex position at DraftKings. Wes, who do you like there?
Okay, again, it's somebody I've mentioned briefly, Orlando Bradford at Arizona, $3,500. Great value. If Nick Wilson doesn't play, you can add him to the list of guys that you must have in your lineup. Of course, this is for DraftKings that we're going with the flex since they don't have tight end. And I mentioned he had 19 carries, 83 yards, and 3 touchdowns last week against Oregon State. He's 5'8", 202 pounds. An absolutely bowling ball, and consider that during his time in high school at Calvary Baptist Academy, his junior and senior season, he averaged 1,155 yards, had a 7.6 rushing average, caught the ball, showed nice hands catching the ball in the backfield, averaged 21.5 touchdowns per season. He has a 30.1 inch vertical, 4.4 40 time. Arizona's projected to score 39 points in this game against Colorado. Colorado has the number 100 ranked rushing defense. They're giving up 4.8 yards per carry. They've given up 7 touchdowns to running backs and 197 yards per game. Those touchdowns will go up if, regardless if Nick Wilson or Orlando Bradford play. But love that play if Wilson doesn't go this week.
Hey, Wes, fantastic stuff there. You are, I think, always fantastic at finding those like bottom barrel guys who have a great chance of getting touches. On DraftKings for the flex, I'm going with wide receiver Shelton Gibson from West Virginia at $4,700. I don't know if you can hear a dog barking in the background, but the dog agrees with me. I normally don't look for receivers in the flex, at least in cash games, but Shelton is at such a discount that I have to get him in my lineup. He's the slate's 13th most productive wide receiver, but he has only the 32nd highest salary for the wide receivers. He's the primary receiver on West Virginia. West Virginia is a pretty good team. He has 5 touchdowns in 5 games, and there's only 1 game so far this season in which he doesn't have at least 80 yards receiving and a touchdown. So he's pretty consistent, and then this game against Baylor is going to be a shootout. West Virginia will have to throw it all game to have any shot of keeping up with the Bears. So I think the odds are good that Gibson can turn one of those passes into a touchdown, and he's almost a near lock each week for at least 75 yards. So, Wes, it is time for Wes's winners. Give me the 2 guys you think could be big for GPP, one at DraftKings and one at FanDuel.
Okay, I'm going to go with and I was shocked to see his price, but actually it's on DraftKings. For some reason, Dwayne Washington. Well, I think I can partially explain it. Dwayne Washington at Washington, running back, is priced at $3,500 this week. Now that I think that's due to his lack of production last week against USC, even though they did win that game, which for him, I'm sure it doesn't matter what he did as long as they won. But yeah, I mean, he's been a really good running back, a great part of that team. For $3,500, he is absolutely a GPP target. And one thing to consider, he's when he was in high school, he was a wide receiver. He has been a great player at catching the ball out of the backfield this season. Actually put up 100 yards a few weeks ago, and he's going up against Oregon. Oregon is not does not have the defense that we've known to expect. They actually have the 54th ranked run defense in the country right now. They've given up 9 touchdowns to opposing running backs. Of course, Washington doesn't have the backfield all to himself, but I don't think that matters. He gets a large number of snaps each game. They're projected to score 30 points against Oregon, and at $3,500 is a great value. The other guy, Virginia Tech Virginia Tech running back Trayvon McMillan. He's actually been named the starter for Virginia Tech, and it's going up against Miami. Last week, Miami allowed Dalvin Cook, who, of course, he's a generational talent, but still allowed Dalvin Cook to rack up 220 rushing yards on 22 attempts. And McMillan has been just looking for that opportunity to get a large number of touches. He's been great on a per snap basis. Comes in at $5,500 at FanDuel, and I really think he's a guy you want to throw into several GPP lineups.
Awesome stuff, Wes. And now give me your 2 plays of the week for Fantasy Feud.
Okay. I mentioned that Tywan Deal is possibly out this week, and of course, Fantasy Feud is had already priced their players. So Dare Ogunbowale, he comes in with a price tag of $81,700, going up against Purdue and their 110th ranked run defense. If he gets all of the carries, he is quite possibly one of the top players in that slate based on point per salary. And then you're going to kick me for saying it again, but I have to go with KD Cannon again this week. And what you have to consider is, even though I've chosen him as a Fantasy Feud play, he's been priced at around $60,000, and in each game I've chosen him, he's at least put up a touchdown and 40 to 60 yards. Now, I do not think that the lack of production has anything to do with Cannon. Baylor has basically, look at the teams they've played. They have not played a significant opponent yet this season. They have not needed to break out their offensive weapons beyond what Corey Coleman has already done. I mean, the guy puts up 3 touchdowns and the offense takes a seat. KD Cannon comes in at $59,600, and to me is a complete steal at that price when you consider that they're going up against West Virginia this week, which is a far superior defense than anything they've faced this season. And I think they're going to need KD Cannon's speed to open up that offense and for the run game. And then at the same time, West Virginia has the defensive backs to double Corey Coleman, and he will. And not to say Corey Coleman's going to get shut down, not to say that in any way, but what I do think is that it will open up opportunities for KD Cannon this week.
All right, Wes, fantastic stuff as always. And that will do it for this edition of the College Daily Slant. Be sure to tune in next episode for our DraftKings and FanDuel Week 8 plays. You can catch us on PFF Radio, subscribe to the show on iTunes, listen to the show on Stitcher and Blog Talk Radio, and watch the show on YouTube and the Fantasy Sports Network. For Wes Huber on Twitter at PFF_Wes, I'm Matt Friedman, Matt at the Oracle. Thanks for tuning in.